welcome back to another video. It's Niko from Yoseka here, and today we're going to be doing a Pelikan lineup. If you hadn't heard of Pelikan before, they're a German fountain pen company from Hanover, Germany. In 1838, they started developing inks at first, and then in 1929 is actually when they came out with their first fountain pen. And this one was actually a piston pill, so it was one of the very first piston fill fountain pens made. Ever since 1929, they've been developing their pens into the lineup we have today. Now, Pelikan is a full-on stationery manufacturer, and they make all sorts of supplies ranging from pens, roller balls, all the way to like glue and even art supplies. Because of their deep history in Germany's stationery industry, Pelikan is a pretty beloved brand, most famously for their piston fill fountain pens, but also because of the versatility of body sizes that we see among their pens. You might have heard of the Pelikan Hub before, which is a global gathering that Pelikan hosts for people who are enthusiasts of pens, inks, handwriting, all of those sorts of things to come together and create a community space. One of the main reasons people are drawn to Pelikan is because they just have under 100 years of working with developing and creating these piston fill pens. And the variety of body and nib sizes on these pens also makes it so that you can find one that fits your hand very comfortably, no matter what size your hand is as well. All right, with that, let's get into the lineup. Before we dive in, I wanted to go through and talk about some of the features that you'll see on pretty much all Pelikan fountain pens. Firstly, all of the Finials have a Pelikan emblem on them, as you can see. This Pelikan emblem is also featured on the nib of the pen, as we'll see here. For the pens that have a stainless steel nib on them, we just see the Pelikan emblem and then it says Pelikan above it, and then we have the nib size pictured on the nib here. And then on their gold nib pens, we have a nice little embellishment on the top, and then we've got the Pelikan logo, and then below that is going to be the carat. So for the case of the 18 karat, it'll say 18C, and the 14 karat will say 14C. I'm assuming the word for carat in German begins in C, which is the reason for that. And then that number is actually followed by a second number that's around 3 digits long, and that's just another way to notate the carat amount of the pen. So for the 18 karat, it says 750, and then for the 14 karat one, it says 585. Moving down the pen, we have the clips, which have they're actually the shape of a pelican bill, as you can see here, which is just like another nice little tribute to their mascot. And then moving down the cap, we have a gold band around the bottom of the cap. And this it can say two different things. So for the 200 line, it's gonna say on both the P200 and M200s, it's just gonna say Pelikan Germany around the band. Whereas in the 400, 600, 800, and 1000 pens, it's gonna say Pelikan Souverän Germany. And Souverän is gonna be the name of their premium line and all the pens that have gold nibs on them. And as you can see here on the Souveräns as well, we're gonna have 2 gold bands on the cap rather than 1. All of these pens come in nib sizes extra fine, fine, medium, and broad. The Pelikans actually have a little bit of a broader nib line when you're writing. It's a little bit thicker than compared to Japanese brands or even other German brands like Kaweco or Lamy. They're just a little bit on the thicker side, so that is something to note. And finally, before we get into the lineup, I wanted to quickly touch on how the Pelikan pens are named. All of the Pelikan pens are gonna follow a code with 1 letter, so the 2 that we're focusing on today are P, which means that it's a converter or cartridge fill pen, and then M, which means it's a piston fill pen. Then we have the first digit, which this indicates the size of the pen, so it'll be 2, 4, 6, 8, or 10. And then the final 2 digits are going to indicate the trim color or any other special features that the pen might have. So for example, with these 2 pens right here, we have the P205 and the M1000. So the P205, the P indicates that it is going to be cartridge fill or converter fill, as we see here. The 2 indicates that it's a small body size. So we can see it here compared to the 1000. And then the 05 at the end indicates that this has a silver trim on it, as you can see here. And then the nib is also silver. For our second example, I have here the M1000. So once again, the M notates that it's piston fill, as you can see from this little piece down here. That's where you twist the piston up and down. The 10 shows that it's a larger pen. Here it is again compared to the P205. You can see that the 10 is much bigger. And then the 00 at the end indicates that it's gold trim. As you can see, the clip, the bands, and then of course the nib are all in the color gold. Before we dive in, just so you guys can get a sense of the range of body sizes of these, I wanted to display them out all by each other. So over here on the left side, I've got the stainless steel nib ones over here. So these are gonna be from the Elegance Classic line. And here we've got the P200s and then the M200s. And then moving on to this right side of the case, I have the M400, 600, 800, and then this 1000 at the very end. So just so you can kind of see the size variance in between all these pens. And with that, we're gonna get into our lineup. We're going to start with the P200 and P205, which are both the converter cartridge models. As you can see, these pens are the exact same size, and the only difference between them is going to be that trim color, where the P200 is gold and the P205 is silver. And you can see here that the nibs are the same size. So comparing this P200 and 205 to the M200, 205, and 215 here, we see that they're the same height, and also the nib sizes are going to be the same on both of these models. The only difference between these two models is that the P are cartridge converter fill, whereas the M is piston fill, as you can see down here on the end of the body of the pen. The M has this band right here where the piston mechanism is going on. And then the P, of course, is lacking that band because you screw the body off to fill it. We also have the M215 over here. Of course, this is the same size as the other 200 pens. This one, the one in the middle, actually notates a special design element of this pen. As you can see, it's got some horizontal stripes going down the body there. And something interesting about this one is that the stripes are not just painted on, they're actually embedded into the body. As I run my finger down here, I can feel the grooves where those silver bands are. So it's not just the painted body of the original M200 in black here. Another thing I wanted to point out here is going to be the color of the indicator window. On the M200, it's a slightly tinted green indicator window. And then on the P215, it is also a black tinted window. So all of these pens that start with a 2 are going to be part of the Pelikan Elegance Classics line, like I mentioned before. And this is the line where they usually put out special editions. So we've seen some yearly editions come out in the past, such as Apricot Acot, Pastel Blue, and then this year's Cherry Blossom color. So now moving on, we're going on to the M400 and 405. And as you can see, these have the same body size as the M200 and 205. The nib size is also the same on these 4 pens. And the difference between these two pens actually lies in the material of the nib. So the M200 is a stainless steel nib, whereas the M400 is where we begin seeing those gold nibs, this one being 14 karat. One other thing is that this marks the beginning of the Souverän line as well. And in the Souverän line, we also see these double rings start to emerge on the cap and on the bottom of the body of the pen. So those features just kind of indicate that it's part of their premium line that has that gold nib in there. Up next, we have the M600 and 605, which I have here. And putting them in here next to the M400 and 405, we see that they're a little bit taller. When we open up the cap and look at the nib, it is also a slightly larger nib than in the M400. It's not the hugest difference, but it is slightly noticeable between the two. And these are both 14 karat gold as well. This M605 that I have right here is actually a special color. This is called Strissman. It's named after the German Prime Minister from the 1920s, who's also a Nobel Prize laureate, and it was inspired by these pinstriped pants that he would often wear. I want to point out here that this one doesn't have a special number like the M215 did, because there's actually, the body is not really being changed in any way other than the design laid within the body. So these, you cannot physically feel them. The body feels the exact same as the M600 does, whereas with the M215, you can actually feel that this body has those rings embedded into it. So this is still a normal M605, it's just in the color Strissman. All right, next up is the M800. So as we place these next to the M600, we'll see a pretty large jump in the body size of these. And then when I open them up, the nib does get quite a bit larger than it did when we jumped from the 400 to the 600. The weight of the pen also does slightly increase when we jump from the 600s to the 800s because from the 800s and up, the piston mechanism is actually made of metal instead of plastic like it is in the previous models. This is where we also jump from a 14 karat nib to an 18 karat nib. And the changes that the 18 karat nib are going to bring is that it's going to be a softer nib, and also because this one is much larger than the 14 karat nibs we've seen previously, it will also have a softer, smoother feel as you're writing as well. Just to show you guys the size of the nib on these M800s, I'm also going to put it next to one of the M400s, which is the same nib size as the 200 as well. And you can see that the nib is much larger. I'll put the 600 in between as well there, just so you can see the three of them. So from top to bottom there, we've got the 800, 600, and 400. With the 800 line, we also get into some of the more specialized pens. For example, the M809 here. This is a fully black pen that is a mix between matte black and shiny black. As you can see, the cap is a little bit shiny, whereas this body is matte. The clip is matte, the finial is matte, and this nib is also black matte. This one is also quite a bit heavier than the M805, I will say. We also get the M815 here. So this one looks similar to the Stressman that we had in the M605 here. But with this one, the 1 digit is in there because the bands in here are actually, they're not like painted on the body. These are actually brass bands that are going down here. So that one in there sort of just notates that this is a special edition pen as well. It's got the same nib size as the other 800s. Finally, we have the M1000. The M1000 is by far the biggest pen in our lineup. Here it is next to the M800s. When we take a look at the nib too, we also see that the nib is quite a bit larger on the 1000 than even the 800s, which was already a pretty big nib. And just to show you guys how large the nib on this one is, I'm going to put it next to all of the pens we've looked at today. So here we have it, the 400, 600, 800, and 1000. To show you the scale of the size of the M1000, I also brought in a Sailor King of pen, which is a fountain pen that I feel like people are pretty familiar with the size of, just to put it next to so you guys can really see the size on that M1000. So as we can see, they're about the same height. The Pelikan does have sort of a raised finial, which makes it just the tiniest bit taller. And when we open up the caps here and compare the nib sizes, you'll see that the M1000 is actually just the slightest bit taller than the Sailor King of pen 21 karat nib here. So it is a very large pen. All right, and with the 1000 done, that brings us to the end of our lineup here. I did want to point out, Pelikan does make many other kinds of fountain pens. This is not the only line they have by far. They make a ton of them that are like beginner friendly. They have a bunch of stainless steel nib ones in a lower price range. They also have lines like the Pura and Toledo, which sort of bring us back into that premium or luxury fountain pen range as well. We chose to focus on the pens we talked about today because when people think of Pelikan, those pens are going to be the ones that come to mind, especially just because they have such a famous history as well. Thank you so much for joining us for this Pelikan lineup today. We hope that you guys were able to learn some things about the differences between all of these fountain pens and sort of understand the naming system of them and also how they're all different. If you own a Pelikan fountain pen, let us know below which one you have, and if not, we'd love to hear your thoughts on any of the ones we showed today. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Bye!